Good evening. Tonight we're following the rapid expansion of federal forces in American cities, a move that has sparked controversy and legal battles. The focus, a significant increase in federal presence in Washington, D.C., as 3 more states prepare to send in National Guard troops. This isn't just about numbers, it's about the example being set and the message the government is sending. We'll break down which states are involved, how many troops they're sending, and what this means for the capital city. On the flip side, Democratic mayors are getting ready for a legal fight, challenging what they see as too much federal involvement. This story has big effects on people's rights and how power is balanced. Let's talk about it. Sending National Guard troops from a state to the nation's capital is a big deal. It shows a major change in how the government handles big problems in the country. It's not just about thousands of people. It also needs states to work together like never before. This process involves complicated planning and tricky legal questions, from moving heavy gear to changing the rules for what they can do in federal areas. The Trump administration has pushed for a planned effort, with West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio now sending troops to D.C. This move makes the deployment bigger than before, when only a few states were involved. This comes after federal agents were used in a controversial way in cities like Portland, and there were threats to do even more. This caused a big argument across the country about how much power the central government should have. The government thinks this deployment is needed to keep law and order during the protests, but critics say it's just a show of political power that's too much and could scare regular people. The National Guard, which usually works for the states to help with local emergencies like natural disasters, is now being used in a very political and tense situation. The legal reasons for this deployment are being looked at very closely, especially about who is responsible, how open things are, and how different groups are supposed to work together. The result is a military zone in the heart of American democracy, with troops from different states patrolling D.C. This creates a situation that's never happened before. For many, this change blurs the lines between what the military does and what regular people do. It raises worries about states' rights, basic human rights, and freedoms in the United States. By getting more states involved, the government is making what used to be an emergency action seem normal. They're trying to show that there's a lot of support and national unity, even though it's causing arguments. Each governor's decision is an important step in this fast-moving national drama, showing the political forces and public pressure at the state level. This isn't just about how many troops there are. It's about a big change in how force is used at home and how the country deals with problems within its own borders. The stakes are high, and the effects will be felt far beyond the capital, changing how people see the military and the government. Let's take a closer look at what each state is contributing, and how these decisions are shaping the future of security policies in America. West Virginia led the new wave of troop deployments, sending up to 400 National Guard members to Washington, D.C., a striking number for a state with a rather small population. Governor Jim Justice, a Trump ally, called this deployment a patriotic duty. He stressed how important it was to protect federal property and support law enforcement in the nation's capital. But what their mission was exactly, and the rules they had to follow, were kept secret from the public. This made people worry more about how open things were and what the real reason for this deployment was. For these soldier citizens, going to D.C. was a big change from their usual job of helping out after disasters, like the floods and storms that often hit West Virginia. Critics in West Virginia questioned if it was really needed or a good idea to send troops to handle protests in another state. They pointed out worries about what the state was focusing on. There were also money and resource worries. Was it best to use these troops in D.C., or were they more needed at home, especially when money was tight and families were waiting in West Virginia? The size of this deployment was very big. It needed a lot of help with supplies, careful planning, and it showed how determined the state government was to help with national operations. The presence of West Virginia troops in D.C. was a strong visual. It made the government's message of law and order stronger and showed that states were working together. This decision had real effects on the soldiers, their families, the state, and it made the national discussion about the military's role in local matters and democracy even deeper. West Virginia's commitment was the biggest of the 3. It was a key part of the growing operation and marked a new chapter in the history of National Guard deployments. South Carolina, led by Governor Henry McMaster, sent about 200 National Guard members to D.C. The stated mission was to support the D.C. Guard and federal law enforcement, focusing on protecting federal property and monuments. This move continued South Carolina's strong support for the Trump administration's policies. For the soldiers, it meant working in a tricky situation with troops from other states and different agencies. This deployment happened during hurricane season, which made people wonder about how resources were being used back home. Critics said the governor had his priorities mixed up, while supporters saw it as a way to show national unity. The mental and moral challenges for these troops are real. They might be seen as protectors or as an occupying force. South Carolina's involvement added to the government's story of a big national effort. Every state flag in D.C. made the picture of a united front stronger, even as arguments grew. This deployment is another important thread in the federal government's increasingly military-like response. Ohio, led by Governor Mike DeWine, sent 150 National Guard members to Washington, D.C. with a quick deployment that shows how urgent it was. Their job was like the others, to help federal law enforcement and protect federal sites. Ohio's decision was a big deal politically, especially since it's a swing state, making some people happy and upsetting others. The fast mobilization shows how quickly these local deployments can happen, setting an example for future operations. Not everyone in Ohio agreed with this move. Groups who care about people's rights and some politicians didn't like using the Guard as a political tool. For the troops, it's a tough job, keeping things secure in a tense and divided situation. The combined effect, 750 new troops from these three states, adds to the already huge security presence in D.C. Each new deployment makes the operation more complicated and bigger. Ohio's help, even though it's the smallest, is a key part of the government's plan and the national discussion. This decision has effects across the country and impacts locally. As federal troops spread out in D.C., the mood in the Capitol got more tense. Military vehicles and armed officers in the streets showed that the central government was stepping up its response to the protests happening across the country. Meanwhile, Democratic mayors across the country got ready to push back against similar deployments in their cities. They worried that these actions could make things worse and threaten local control. In places like Seattle and Baltimore, worries about federal involvement made city leaders act fast and strong. Mayors worked together on legal plans and got lawsuits ready to challenge federal involvement, working with teams of lawyers and policy advisors. They argued that policing is a local matter and federal forces are not welcome without permission. City officials stressed how important it is to keep control over security matters in their own areas. City leaders are making rules to limit working with federal agencies, like limiting access to data and coordinating operations. These steps aim to make federal operations tough without local support, while also making the city's position stronger when talking with the central government. This group of mayors stood together against the plan, forming a communication network to share information and make cities stronger together. They shared legal summaries and plans to protect local control, supporting each other when facing pressure from the federal government. Their legal arguments focused on the 10th Amendment and the Posse Comitatus Act, which limits the use of the military for law enforcement at home. They stressed the limits on federal power, highlighting how important the idea of federalism is in the American government system. This fight is about the Constitution and politics, involving heated arguments in courtrooms, city halls, and national media. Mayors defended community-led policing against what they saw as too much federal interference, stressing how important trust is between police and citizens. Cities are also looking at their crowd control rules to avoid giving the government a reason to step in and to make sure people's rights are still protected. This pushback is happening in courtrooms, city halls, and public statements, a big test of federal power that hasn't been seen in decades. How this conflict gets settled will decide the balance between federal, state, and local authority for years to come. The stakes for civil liberties and local control are very high, and the outcome will affect the future of democracy in America. Tonight, hundreds of National Guard troops from West Virginia and South Carolina and Ohio are heading to D.C., while mayors across the country are getting ready to say no to similar deployments. This is a country struggling with big questions about power, who's in charge, and what the military's role is with regular people. The situation is tricky and changing super fast. We'll keep following what happens, from where the troops go to the legal fights, and what it means for politics. Stay in the know. This story will have big effects on American democracy for a long time.